Welcome to Mama Mabel's Caregivers podcast. I am Talisa Angel Garcia, and this episode is different. No lights, no camera, no polished studio shots, just my voice, my heart that has broken wide open. Throughout this episode, I am sharing various pictures of 9-year-old Zemarking III. I ask that you look at these pictures because his full face was never shown to the world as he deserved and he mattered. I also ask that if you or anyone you know is suffering from a mental crisis, that you check the description of this episode for a list of resources. What I'm about to share with you isn't just a story. It's a wound that hasn't scabbed over. It's a weight I didn't see coming, and one I now carry every day. It's about a little boy named Zemarking III, who was 9 years old. Bright, beautiful, but now gone. It's about a tragedy that shattered everything I believed about someone I loved. And it's about what happens when you still love someone, even after the unthinkable. If you're listening today, I ask one thing. Please lean in with your whole heart. So it started in January of 2025. I was standing in my kitchen. This was the kind of day where the air felt off. Like your body senses the storm before your mind catches up. Then the message came through. Brandy, my friend, my sister, and everything but blood, was in jail. In Georgia. 2 felony charges, one for theft, one for drug possession. I froze. I clicked the arrest record, and then I saw her mugshot. I stared at the screen, and then I stared harder. But the woman in that photo, it wasn't her. The pink-loving, hip-rolling, quick-witted woman who once gave me my first real taste of being seen, she was gone. In her place, a hollowed-out shell, eyes that didn't reflect light, a mouth set in stone, a version of her I didn't recognize. I didn't rush to post bail, not because I didn't love her, but because if the drug charges were real, if fentanyl was involved, she might not make it out alive. The next time. Sometimes love means doing the hardest thing imaginable, not rescuing someone who might destroy themselves. Still, my thoughts went straight to her sons, her 2 boys, 3 and 9 years old. Where were they? A week later, I received my answer, and it came like a bullet through the chest. Calls, texts, video links, headlines. I was sitting on my couch when I opened the clip. Detroit prosecutor Kim Worthy holding a national press conference. The room was packed, cameras flashing, police standing behind her, and then she spoke Brandy's full name. My mouth went dry. She was being charged with the murder of her 9-year-old son, Zemarking III. My body didn't move, not at first. She said Brandy smothered him, then choked him, then tied his small wrists to his ankles, and buried him in a shallow grave behind the house she was renting. The prosecutor kept talking. Something about a timeline, about Brandy fleeing the state with her toddler, leaving him completely naked, in the car while she went into a plasma donation center sometime in December. But I wasn't hearing anymore. My hands were shaking. My vision tunneled. My phone slipped from my grasp and hit the floor with a cold, sharp sound. I bent over and held my breath like it would keep the truth from landing. But it landed. It hit. And I shattered. That night I kept thinking, how could she? Why didn't she call me? I've been there. I've always been there. Through every heartbreak, every celebration, every crossroad. Why did she shut me out now? What did I do or fail to do? What did I fail to do that made her think she couldn't reach out? My brain was running missions. It was running mission drills, replay after replay, trying to spot the signs I missed. At the same time, the grief was mounting. And then came the headlines. TikToks, newsreels, social media sleuths tearing it apart like vultures, circling around like roadkill. The case went viral. The mugshot went global. But you know what didn't? Zemar. His story, his name, his face. No one stood for him. So I called my circle, my best friends who knew her like I did, the ones who loved her like a sister, with one of my friends who even shared the same birthday as her. We jumped on a three-way call, hearts in our throats, voices breaking. We were trying to process something that doesn't make sense, even with a full timeline. We didn't have explanations. All we had was devastation. Let me tell you about the Brandy I knew. We met in college. I was introduced to her and my other best friend, who is also a part of my inner circle, until this very day at the same time. I was the nerd who always carried the heavy backpack and too many books. She was the cool girl, Detroit through and through, stepping out of her old school Monte Carlo in head to toe pink, cigarette in hand, hair laid, confidence like armor. While passing by, I smiled and said, "Hi, Brandy." Unable to wave my hand due to the amount of books I was carrying, Brandy looked at me, gave me the nod, and said, "What up, though?" I thought she was so cool, y'all. I remember our conversations where we just talked and laughed about different topics. Before finding out I was an INTJ, I yet displayed the characteristics and personality traits. I remember Brandy saying, "Talisa, you're odd, but in a cool way." That moment changed something for me. It made me feel like I could be exactly who I was. No fixing, no shrinking. She taught me how to hip roll. Y'all remember how to hip roll, right? I still got it. And it's because of Brandy. Brandy told me to always look and dress my best when I was feeling the worst, because when you look good, it helps you to feel good. Brandy stood next to me when I graduated from Michigan State University. And when I got my first corporate job straight out of college, she celebrated me louder than anyone else and had been this way for decades. As our friendship was equal, I always showed up for her and did the same. She wasn't just my friend, she was my chosen family. She was also the only one in our group who ever said out loud, "I can't wait to be a mom." So when she had Zemar, it felt like we all had him. Although now I live down south, I made sure to visit her at the hospital the day Zemar was born. I remember walking into her hospital room alongside my beloved mother and kissing Brandy on the forehead. She opened her eyes and I smiled and said, "Surprise!" I held and stared at little Zemar in awe. I loved that little boy, and I still do. What shattered me even more, at the press conference, no one stood for him. No family, no friends, no community. No one held up a picture, not even a nameplate, just a grainy side profile image in which no one could see what he looked like. This precious child disappeared into a headline. Not on my watch. No, not on my watch. Because he mattered to me. I loved him. Therefore, I called the Detroit Police Department. I said, I knew him, I loved him, and I want to make sure this baby is laid to rest with dignity, love, honor, and respect. They connected me to a detective. I verified who I was. I sent baby photos no one else had. I even spoke to the prosecutor directly. Then I asked, what about his father? That's when I found out Zemar's biological father had just learned he was his dad through a post-mortem DNA test. Can you imagine? Finding out you had a son only after he was murdered? I reached out. I spoke with Mr. Brown and his wife, told them everything I knew, shared the baby pictures. I even used AI to age those photos so people could see what Zemar looked like at age 9. Not a shadow, not a side profile, but a face. His face. The face of a child who mattered. These pictures were used for his funeral service, in which Zemar was laid to rest with love, honor, dignity, and respect. People are interesting sometimes, y'all. Reason why I say that is because there were people who told me to stay out of it, to let it go, let the legal system handle it. But I couldn't, because if it were me, if something happened and I was left to be buried by people who didn't know my soul, I'd want someone to stand up, not just someone with my DNA, someone with my story. That's what love does. It shows up. Even when the world says don't, even when it's inconvenient, even when it hurts like hell. I spent January, February, and March grieving every day, every night. Some days I couldn't speak. Some nights I couldn't sleep. I felt like I was grieving two people, Zemar and Brandy. One lost to murder, the other to something I may never understand. And maybe that's the hardest part. Still loving someone who may have done the unimaginable. But that's what I've learned about unconditional love. It's not polite. It's not perfect. It's not even logical. It's just there. When my mother was dying of stage 4 breast cancer, I gave her everything I had. I cooked meals from scratch for her. I made sure she had CNAs and nurses. I averaged 2 hours of sleep. And I was having a home built for her at the same time. All of this, and she kept giving financially to a relative who wouldn't lift a finger for her. Y'all, I was very angry about this. I was confused, and I was also hurt. I asked, why, Mama? Why? My mom then looked at me and said that person's name, followed by the title in our family, then said, I love her. Nothing else was said. She didn't owe me a justification. She loved, and that was that. Now I understand. Because no matter how twisted this whole thing is, no matter how much I hurt, I still love Brandy. I may never speak to her again. I may never understand her choices. But the love is still there. That doesn't mean I excuse anything. It just means I won't lie to myself about what's in my heart. If you or someone you love is struggling, I need you to know this. You don't have to carry it alone. Call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. They're there 24/7. It's confidential, it's free. And if you need other resources, they're listed in the episode description. Thank you for listening, for holding space for Zemar, for truth, for complexity, and for grief. This episode broke me open, but it's the kind of story that demands to be told because Zemarking III mattered. His life mattered. His smile mattered. His memory still matters, and so does yours. Until the next time, be gentle with yourselves and love like it costs something, because it does.